Good morning. I'm Aaron Heiser of Maker's Leather Supply, and this video is part 3 of the Kodiak backpack kit that is being offered through Tandy. And yeah, I must start this video by apologizing. I totally left out 2 whole pieces of leather yesterday when we did everything we did. And here's what they look like, right there. And what these are going to be is like the padding on our shoulder straps. If we just use that 1-inch shoulder strap there, if you put any kind of weight whatsoever in this bag, you'd wear your shoulders up pretty quick. So by putting these pieces on here like that, it'll make it much nicer to wear, and it also looks really nice too. So we need to prepare those pieces to put together. You've got your 1-inch straps that were included in the kit, and they're not cut to any kind of dimensions already, but they need to be. And we need to cut 2 30-inch straps out of these pieces, okay? And there should be plenty of strapping there to do everything you need, plus probably some. So what I'm going to do is grab a 1-inch round punch, okay, like for doing belt ends and stuff like that. You don't have to have this tool. These punches are not cheap, I understand, and if your tool collection doesn't include them yet, that's okay, because something else that is a 1-inch radius like this is a US quarter. So take a quarter, put it on the end of your strap, and cut around it to get your rounded end, okay? So what I'm going to do is put that right on the very end of my strap here, give it a whack. Okay, now I'm going to put it up against my ruler and measure 30 inches and do the exact same thing on the other end. Let me get you to where you can see my desk. Alright, so I go over to the other end and I make a 30-inch strap. Now I'm going to turn around and do the exact same thing with the other end of this, because the 2 together were less than 60 inches, so, or this one whole piece, I mean, was less than 60 inches. More than 60 inches, holy crud. I'm not thinking right today, folks. You may just want to turn the volume down and watch what I do and not listen to what I say. And I was wrong, it wasn't longer. I told you it was less than 60 inches. Alright. So we'll start the second one here, and what I'm going to do is just put this one right on top of this one. That way, in case I mismeasured it by 1/4 of an inch, they're still going to be the same length. Okay, because it's okay if it's not exactly on the nose of 30 inches, but they do need to be the same length. Alrighty, those are ready. Now, we're going to take, I'll put this giant ruler away before I knock it down. We're going to take these pieces of leather that we forgot yesterday, and it's 4.5 inches wide at one end, 2.5 inches wide at the other end. So I'm going to take and mark the centers of both of those ends, and then draw a line directly down the middle lengthwise on this piece. Okay, so just marking it with an ink pen. It's the back side, and it'll never ever be seen again. So there we go. I marked the center of both ends. Now I'm just going to take a ruler that's long enough and put it in between those lines and draw a line all the way down that piece of leather. There we go. Then I need to do the same thing on the other piece. But now that one's already measured, I can just cheat. I'll put this one on top of this one, mark my centers. If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. And mark a line right down the middle of this one. There we go. All right, now I'm going to take a piece of double-sided tape. I've got this really wide one here. This one's 3/4 of an inch. You don't have to have a wide piece of double-sided tape. You can use the regular 1/4 inch that we used on other pieces and just put one strip on each side of this line. But since I have a wide one, I'm going to put one strip right down the middle of that line. And I'm going to look for scissors. You know, I actually put them away. Okay, and again, I'm doing this everything twice because I've got two pieces here. All right, I will remove the backing from the tape. Again, if you used 2 1/4 inch pieces, that's cool. Just do the exact same thing and pretend it's one piece of tape. Now, what I have to do is I'm going to roll these edges both towards the center and just line them up right there with that center line that I can see through my double-sided tape. Just like that. I'm going to turn it around and do the exact same thing again. Alright, now I'll take my squeaky toy, roll that nice and flat, and I'm going to pause the video while I do that all one more time with the other strap so that you don't have to watch. Alright, when I come back we will adhere those to the heavy duty part of the backpack strap. Alright. So I got both of these rolled over and they're nice and identical and everything looks great with those. So I'm going to set them aside for just a minute. I'm going to grab these straps that I built a while ago. And what I need to do is mark just a line on the back of them, 2 inches from one end. Okay? This ruler is exactly 2 inches wide, so I'm just going to kind of line them up there. And I'll just grab an ink pen, or actually, you know what, I'll use this scratch awl, and I'm just going to scratch a little line on the back side of the straps. Back side. Side that is not seen. Okay? From there, I'm going to take another big old piece of tape. I'm going to run it right down that seam that we created when we folded over those sides there. And then I'm going to stick them to this, right with the widest part being right at that 2 inch mark up there. Again, if you don't have the big wide tape, it's perfectly okay to use like 2 pieces of the 1/4 inch tape, put them right there on either side of that seam, and you'll be all right. As long as they're not wider than the strap that's about to cover them. Okay. Pull the backing off my tape. And using that line as my reference to make sure that I've got 2 inches of strap sticking out the top, I'm just going to center it right down that strap. And there's what we're looking at right there. It'll look really nice once that's all stitched up. Forgot an important step. I apologize. Let's use a number 1 edger. I'm going to go ahead and pull that one back off because I shouldn't have done this without edging it. And we're going to edge the those 2 straps. Let me get my double-sided tape back off this, and we'll just pull another piece in a minute. Oops. I'm using a number 1. A number 1 or a number 2, no matter which brand, are probably going to be the right size for what you need. This particular one is it's a Berry King, but I have 3 different brands of edgers up there, and all 3 of them, the number 1 or the number 2, would work just fine for this. So I'm going to edge both sides. And then I'm just going to edge one of them right now, and I'll stick it back on there, and then I'll once again pause the camera because you don't have to watch me do everything twice. It's a relatively easy procedure here, so I know that watching me do it more than once isn't going to help anybody. I get people come into the shop, and you know, whether it's the wife or the husband that does leather work, you know, one of them will say, "Oh, I watch all your videos," and their spouse will usually say, "Yeah, they do," which tells me that they're probably tired of hearing my voice. That's okay. Alright, so I got this one nice and edged. I've got my 2-inch mark up here. Oop, let me get down on camera. My 2-inch mark's right there. It's barely visible in the camera. And again, I'm putting that 2-inch mark up at the top. Alright, now, in the very first iteration of this backpack, the one that I've been showing as an example, I'll bring it up and I'm going to show you why we're stopping at 2 inches from the top. This one, I did not stop 2 inches from the top. Bring my camera up a little. I didn't stop 2 inches from the top. The backing here goes all the way down inside this cover piece, and honestly, it makes these way too rigidly stiff, and like the bag doesn't, you know, like these should just kind of flop down naturally, and they don't. So that's why we now do the 2-inch line, so that only this part is sewn under that piece, and then this will be more flexible, and it'll work a lot better. Alright, so I'm going to pause the camera. I'm going to do all the exact same stuff to this other strap. Alright, so I got these 2 pieces stuck back on, and we're back here over at the Class 18 machine that we were using in the previous videos. And all I'm going to do is start sewing kind of near the end here, all the way down the strap, around the bottom, and then back up to here again. I don't need to seal it off or double stitch or anything up here, because that's going to be hidden inside the bag later. I do need to check my bobbin on this machine, because I'm not sure in what condition I may have left it last time I used it. So plenty of bobbin thread. We'll get through these just fine. Alright, I've got this edge guide one of the cool things about this is I can raise it up off the bottom of the machine, so that when I go over an area like this, it'll ride up over the lining piece basically and up against this strap. So it's going to work out really well for what I'm doing. So anyway, we will get started. Now, a lot of people don't know this about sewing machines, but when you go from one thickness to another on leather, the stitch length changes. The thinner the leather, the bigger the stitch length is going to be. And then, of course, vice versa, the thicker the leather, the stitch length is going to get shorter. So when I climb up from doing just one piece to doing the padded area onto it, I will actually adjust my stitch length just one click. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger by just one click on the adjuster over here, and then when I step back down off the padding, I'll move it back, and that'll help me keep a consistent stitch length on there. So here we go. Alright, now I'm up on the thick part, so I'm going to loosen that stitch up just one little click there. Now we're just going to go to town on it. Now this machine's up against the wall, so I actually have to watch that once this strap gets to the wall, it can keep it from feeding through the machine. So I've got to reach back here and kind of grab it and pull it up. You got to be cognizant of things like that, because that can ruin a project real quick. Alright, now I've stepped back down to the single thickness, so I'm going to readjust that stitch and just close it down one more click, and we'll go around the other part of it down here. Again, as I do a turn, like on the bottom of this strap, I'm going to do all my turning while the needle's down in the leather to keep my stitch length consistent. Alright, now we're going to go right back up the other side doing the exact same thing. Okay, we're up on the thicker part again, so I'm going to adjust that stitch one click. Keep on rocking. Down here at the end, one more click again. There we go. Alright, so there's one of them. And again, I'm going to pause the video so that I can do the other one and you don't have to watch me do it. And when I come back, these two straps will be done. Here's what we're looking at. Started the stitch up here, went down and all the way around the bottom of it, and then came back up the other side. Alright folks, so those are done. Those two shoulder straps are done and sewn. And I set them on my desk behind me, but there they are. They look pretty. I'm excited. This is the first one of these I've made without like contrasting colors, and I really like how it's coming together. So, yeah. That being said, if you want contrasting colors, yes, the ones that come in the kit are the nice dark brown leather and stuff, but you could cut these kind of straps out of veg tan or something like that, and they would really, really go nice with this dark brown Kodiak leather. So, yeah. All right, so here what I have is the front panel that we put the zippers and stuff like that on yesterday. We've got our front pocket piece right here, and then this is the front pockets flap. All right, and what we're going to do is we got to figure out where we're going to put all these pieces. I've always just kind of assembled this as we go, so I'm going to make some measurements as I go, and I'll actually give you the measurements here so that it's a little easier for you to figure out. But again, like I said, I've always just kind of I've actually sewn this pocket on first and then gone and figured out where to put the flap and all that stuff. I don't want to confuse you with all that, so we're going to do it the right way and do proper instructions here, and we're not going to do stuff the backwards Aaron way. So I'm going to use a couple of binder clips here. Okay, I love these things. You can also use those little plastic sewing clips. They come in packages of a couple of hundred on Amazon. But I like these binder clips because they're super duper strong. However, the drawback to them is they can scratch your leather. I have seen people actually take and glue leather inside these, and then you don't have that issue. But I mean, I've got a gigantic coffee can full of these. These are just the ones I pulled out to set on my desk. But yeah, so kind of like the one on my hat. If you knew the story behind it, it all started here. All right. So I'm just going to take and put a couple of these at the very bottom of this piece, clipping the pocket onto the back pan or the front panel here. And I'm going to put the clip, really hanging off the edge, because in case it scratches the leather, I want it to be down inside the seam. All right. Now, I'm going to take my pocket flap and put it behind it, and just kind of figure out how much of it I want to fold over the pocket itself. And to me, that looks about right. Knowing what straps are going to go on it and the fasteners and all that stuff, this right here looks about right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave it in position, take my two little clips back off, throw my pocket piece to the side, and I'll measure this for you. And it is right at 6 inches if it were actually straight. So it's exactly right at 6 inches from the very bottom of this front panel piece to the bottom of this top or of this pocket flap. And then of course the flap is centered right to left on the panel piece because it is it is a little bit more narrow than the front of the bag is. Reason it's more narrow is because we have to have those seams on the panel when it's all sewn together, and then it'll be just right when that bag's turned right side out later. So 6 inches, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and put my ruler up here at the base of this, and I'm just going to very lightly scratch me a line on the panel so that I don't have to continue measuring that every time I pick it up and put it down. So I'm just going to take my scratch awl and go along the edge of the ruler here and scratch me a little line. And there it is. Now I don't have to worry about measuring that anymore. Plus, that line will never be seen on the finished bag because it's inside the pocket, just at the base of the flap. And I mean, you'd have to stick your head inside the pocket if you wanted to see that line. So, the other thing we have to do is we've got a strap that's going to go on this piece. Okay, so we're going to cut a strap that comes off this piece and hangs down an additional 2 to 3 inches. And it's going to go through those little loops right there. And then we'll have to skive the other side because it'll sew to the bag with the flap. Hopefully any of that makes sense. So I've got some more of my strapping material here, this 1 inch wide strip. I am going to knock me an end on it. And then I'm just going to kind of measure it out. Like if I wanted it to come down a couple of inches past that, about like so. And I'll mark this and then I'll measure it for you so that you can see how far it is. It is just at 10 inches. Okay, so I'm going to take my just a regular old cutting knife here. I say regular old, this is a Terry Nipchel miniature head knife. I love this thing. Poor Terry's shop burned down. We don't know if he's going to be making knives again or not. Alright, and then same thing, I'm going to make another one, a duplicate one. So I'll take it, put my round end on one end of it, put it exactly on top of the other one, and I'll cut to match. Right at 10 inches. Now, the next thing I have to do is I need to skive the ends, the squared off ends of these down, okay? Because they're going to end up sewing, they'll be stuck right here and sewn in with the bag flap to the bag body, okay? Or the pocket flap to the bag body, all right? So the first thing I'm going to do is round my edges on this, and then I'm going to skive those ends down just a little bit. And I'll use a hand skiver so you know I don't always cheat and use the machine. It's a very small area to skive, so I'm not too worried about messing it up. That being said, I know I could mess it up if I try nice and hard. Apparently Oscar has found someone to bark at out there. Alright. I'll grab my little hand skiver here. And I'm just going to, on the flesh side, the back side of the leather, I'm just going to skive it down a little bit where it's going to sew underneath the flap. You don't have to skive it to feathered edge or anything crazy like that, but I am going to skive it enough that it doesn't create like a bulge where I sew it down. Okay, so I'm skiving about 3/4 of an inch. Just like that. Now, when I'm done skiving, I've got this ugly, uneven edge here where it kind of drags some of the leather off because my blade's not all that sharp. So I'm just going to trim that so I know there's a definitive edge to that strap right there. Okay? Both pieces. There we go. I'm going to find the cover for this knife because I kick myself if I get it nice and nicked up and can't use it. Because like I said, Terry may not be making any more. I don't know. Alright, now I'm going to go over to the sewing machine and I'm just going to stitch around these real quick. Alright, I'm not even going to move the camera or anything. There's not really a reason to. I'm just going to put a sew line around the outside edge, starting up here, where it'll be sewn underneath this, going down and around and back up the other side on both of them. Alrighty, so got that piece, both those pieces stitched up. Alright, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed them through these little slots on this cover piece, the pocket flap. And I'm going to start out by just taking a little tool that fits in here, any little tool, you could use a pencil, it doesn't matter. I'm going to kind of stretch that out a little bit because it's pretty tight tolerances. I don't want that strap to slide freely through there when the bag is built. So I keep these things nice and tight and don't have loose tolerances on it. I'm just going to pull it through until the back of it is even with the end of that flap. Okay, like that. And then in a minute I'll even put a piece of tape on there to kind of hold that still and straight for when I go to sew the bag flap onto the bag body. Alright, just like that. So, I'm going to find my little tape. I'm just going to cut me 2 little pieces of it off. We'll put them on the backs of these little straps. And then I've got this thing squarely on my bench facing me because I want to make sure that that strap stays very parallel with the edge of the flap, okay? And I'm going to stick it down after, yeah, I already pulled the paper off. So, just sticking it on there. Like that. Now we do the other one. If you want to use a ruler or something to really line that up and make sure it's perfectly square and parallel, you can. I don't really feel the need, and my eyeballs are still working well enough to do this for now. I'm sure there will be a day that I need it. Okay, there it is. That's the front pocket flap right there. Now I'm going to go back and set this up on my front panel here. And I'm just going to double and triple check everything to make sure it's all good before I start stitching anything together. So I'm going to take some double-sided tape and put across there to stick this to the bag itself. Going across the finished side here. Line up with that line that I drew earlier. I'm going to just lay it on here, and then I'm going to make sure it's centered right to left and make sure there's an even gap on both sides of it before I press it down to affix it into place for stitching. Okay, put my pocket back on here. Then I'm just going to gently bend it over to make sure that the straps aren't too long for the bag and stuff like that. I don't want these straps hanging down below the bottom of the bag because then they just get nasty and worn and beat up. I am going to back these straps up just a little bit so that it creates a more natural fold right there and it doesn't wrinkle it up. And I think we're looking pretty good here. That's going to be it's going to be about right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going over to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew this flap to that front piece there. So we're getting pictures of it as we go here.
Actually, take that out.
Alright, I'm going to move the camera, but I'm going to pause it so you don't get some vertigo issues going on while this camera's flipped around. Alright, this is a real simple sew line. All I'm going to do is sew right at the very top of the skive mark here. And yeah, that's it. I'm going to back stitch first because this will not be inside of any other seams or anything later. This is the whole kit and caboodle for this piece being sewn on. Alright, so I'm going to kind of bend it down, and the problem is I can still see some of that tape right there. I put it a little bit high. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a second stitch line a little bit above that to make dang sure all that tape is covered up. We don't like to see the tape. It makes our stuff look cheap. Because our customers or friends or whoever we're making this bag for, they don't need to know that we use magic tape to hold these things together before we sew them. So I just went up about 1/4 of an inch, maybe a little bit less, and I'm creating a secondary stitch line up here. That's how, you know, it's just an example of how the bag pattern is, it can be modified a little bit. You know, you don't have to, everything doesn't have to be all exacting standards. This is not a production line. This is, every one of them is handmade. When it comes down to it, you know, 2 of these bags sitting next to each other, you would never know that one of them had that second little stitch line in it. It'd be alright. Alright, so now we fold it down, we see no tape, and life is good. Alright, back to the desk we go. We're going to do a lot of flipping back and forth from the desk to the sewing machine here. Alright, back at the desk, we're going to work on this pleated part here, and so that we can add it to the front panel there. But we got a little bit of work to do. And I'm sure I could have designed this better, but it's one of those things, I designed it and then later redesigned it. So you're going to have to bear with me on how I do this part. Alright? The pleated pocket, as it is before you pleat it and fold that under, is wider than the bag body. But we want it to be exactly the width of the bag body. Okay? And again, I've made this piece that now sews onto here to keep from having to sew that pleat into this difficult seam down here. Alright, so what I do now is I kind of fold my pleats up like so, and I use one of my magical little clips here to hold it pleated like so. And now when I fold these, I fold them where the middle section is up on top. I don't, if I folded it the other way, then the middle section would be like sunken down, and I think it looks right doing it this way. If you'd like to do it the other way, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a different way to do it. Now with those just kind of preemptively folded here, I'm going to make sure that it's the width I need it, which is the exact width of this front panel. Okay, and I got lucky because it is. Now, this is the part where I kind of fudged some stuff and made some stuff work, I guess you could say. But what I did is I cut out another one of these pieces that was included, you know, we explained this piece to you in the very beginning of the bag. It's the one that we skived on 3 sides. And I'm going to take it and I'm going to put it right across there. Okay, completely across the front of that, and I'm going to tape it down all the way across. Then I'm going to sew it down all the way across, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to cut the bottom of this off. Not of both pieces, just of the pleated part, and that way the pleats don't go down into the bag seam. And while this seems like a ridiculous step, and I promise it'll make more sense, what's ridiculous is trying to sew that pleat into the turned seam of the bag. It's a pain in the rear, I promise. So, I'm going to take, and on the non-skived side of this, I'm going to put a big piece of tape. These are the kind of things that when Tandy asked me to make a kit for this bag, I was like, you know, because there's a lot of fudging and there's a lot of, you know, measure this and stuff like that. But honestly, I feel that this kit will teach a lot of people how to overcome problems. You know, how to do some things that maybe they didn't know how to do, or, you know, or at least show them a way that I do things to overcome some issues, and maybe they can adapt that into their own style and way. Okay, so I'm going to get this out of the way so it doesn't confuse anybody, because we're not doing anything with that right this very second. I want to make sure that this pleated area is exactly the same width as this piece right here. And it is. After I clipped it nice and clipped the pleats into it, it's exactly the width I needed. If for whatever reason it's too wide or too narrow, then just adjust your pleating just a little bit. I mean, if you move it 1/8 of an inch, then you're actually moving it 1/4 of an inch, because it's two pieces moving 1/8 of an inch. And the more I talk, the more I'm confusing myself, so maybe I'll just shut up and show you. Alright, so what I'm going to do is take this tape off, or the backing off the tape. I'm going to hold this sucker right even with the bottom of the pleated piece, and I'm going to stick it down like so, and then one side at a time I'll make it run across and stick it down all the way to the edge. There we go. Now, I'll go over to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew that line right there from end to end. And then we're going to trim off the very bottom of the pleated piece so that it's just not in the way anymore. Alright, so once again, we're going to flip around to the sewing machine. We'll be right back. Alright, back at the Class 18. I'm going to sew that little line up. Start with my back stitch, and I'm just sewing it right along the edge. Make my stitch a little shorter there. I'm just sewing it right at the edge, and it's going to be great. Some sewing machines have a difficult time walking like over that pleat, so you do have to kind of go slow and make sure that it's going to go and walk over it without causing a bunch of unnecessary stitching and smaller stitches or whatever. So I'm actually using my hand to turn the hand wheel here just to ensure the accuracy of it. As this secondary area here drags along, I want to make sure that pleat stays folded. Like, it tried to get caught on the edge of my machine here, and I want to make sure it stays folded over nicely so I don't lose it. Alright, so there it is. Cut this loose, I'll show you at the camera, and then once again, we're going back to the desk. what we're looking at. Going to be a much cleaner appearance than trying to sew that pleat into the seam of the bag, I promise. Alright, on this one I did sew that pleat right into the bag, and between that area right there, the bottom gusset, and that pleat, you can actually see all kinds of loose stitches and things like that in there because, well, it's just not the right way to do it. You don't figure that out until the second or third one sometimes. Story of my life. Alright, trim my threads here, and then we are going to cut off the bottom of the pleated part. Okay, so all this is now excess. That where we went and skived it and all that stuff, it's now just junk. Sorry. And again, we're not cutting the piece that we just sewed on there, we're just cutting the pleated part. There we go. Now we have a pocket that's really nice. The only other thing we have to do is we need to re-round that area right there. Okay? So, real simple to do. I'm going to put my bag body on top of it, and I'm just going to trace around it with an ink pen, and then I'll cut those corners back down to the radius that they need to be. Again, I apologize, I could have made all of this part of the clicked out kit and everything, but one, that doesn't teach us near enough, and two, this was an afterthought that turned out to work really, really well compared to the original design concept of this bag. Alrighty, got those lines marked. I'm just going to take my scissors and trim that out right quick, and it'll be beautiful. All of these things are hidden inside the seams of the bag. You'll never, ever, ever, ever see them. There we go. Like it never happened. Okay, so now another trick that I've learned is, the first couple of these bags I made, I would clip all this stuff together and then try to sew the bag together all at once. And man, was I wrong in trying to do that. Trying to layer 4 or 5 different things, going around corners and things like that. The easier solution is this. I am going to take and sew this pocket onto this front panel at just the very, very outside edge of my my skived area here. Okay, and then when I go to sew the front panel to the gusset, I won't have to worry about those 2 layers coming apart from each other. Alright, so that's what we're going to do now. I can use double-sided tape, I can clip it down, I can whatever, as long as I hold it on there long enough to get it stitched on. So let me find my roll of 1/4 inch and my scissors. I'm not even worried about the corner type area since it's just a flat sewing. I'm just going to put this tape right along here. And this is the reason that we give ourselves a real nice 1/2 inch or more seam allowance, is so that we can do things like this and it won't cause any of these extra stitches to show once we turn the bag the right side up. Alright, now once again I'm going to start with the bottom and get it straight across there and make sure that the sides are going to line up and stick it all together. Alright, once again, back to the sewing machine we go. Stitch that little area up right quick, and then we're going to go ahead and put the locks fasteners on the flap, and that's going to be it for this section of video. So here we go. I'm going to pause the camera. Alright, back at the sewing machine. Real quick and easy. I am not worried about making this stitch pretty as long as it's right on the very edge so that it won't be seen in the turned bag later. And I'm telling you, this saves so much headache when you're trying to sew the entire gussets and everything together later. There we go. It is sewn together. Alright, like I said, we're going to put those locks fasteners on there, and we're going to call this sucker done for this part of the video. In the next video, we'll actually be assembling fronts to sides and backs and all that other fun stuff. Alright, now, here's the fun part with these locks fasteners. To make sure that these all line up perfectly, I build all of this first and then put my locks fasteners in it. Okay? So what I have somewhere on my desk there it is. This is just a piece of Tandy's Poundo board that I've been using for years. I mean, it is quite warped. I need to replace it. But I'm going to set this down inside the pocket, and it'll help kind of maintain that pleat and everything. I'm going to fold this piece over it, and I'm going to mark where I want to put my holes for my locks fasteners. But first, there's something else I need to do. We have to put two D-rings on this piece before we can do that. Okay? So there's one of my D-rings. And the other one of my D-rings. So I need to take these straps out of here, put the D-ring on it, and then put the strap back. And that D-ring is going to be what the top flap clips down to. Alright. So it'll set right there. Same thing here. If I forget to put the D-rings on before I put the locks fasteners on, I'm not 100% sure, but I would probably have to take the locks fastener back off because the D-ring I don't think would fit over it. Alright. So I got those where they need to be. I got the straps pulled down to where they need to be again. And what I'm going to do is just kind of line the strap up where it falls on this is right at that seam that I did right there. See how nice this is already looking? Like all that extra stitching and everything really looks nice on this bag, in my opinion. Some people don't like it as much, I guess, but I do, so that's why I designed it this way. Alright, now I'm going to take a ruler, I'm going to lay across here so that I can set these locks fasteners up straight. And I want them, you know, perfectly parallel to each other. I don't want one of them setting 1/4 of an inch higher than the other or something like that. So you can put them wherever you want, but I'm basically, like I said, I'm making the strap to where it comes down to that sew line right there, and then I'm going to put the locks fastener pretty much right in the middle of that area so that there's an equal amount of distance around all 3 of these sides to the locks fastener being in the middle. So it's almost at the very end of the strap, okay? And that's just, aesthetically, that's how I like to do it. Now, I need to grab a 3/8 of an inch hole punch. And the other reason I do all this at once so that I can put the hole all the way through all these layers at one time, and it's perfectly lined up, as opposed to punching holes in the strap and then later trying to punch holes in the pocket part. Okay. So I'm going to look, and I'm going to measure put this hole punch to where it's centered right to left on this strap, but then there's also an equal amount of spacing from the end of the strap up to the hole punch, and I'm going to give it a whack. Okay, I'll give it 3 whacks. Make sure it went through all the layers to include that pleated pocket piece. And then I'm going to move over here to the other side and do the exact same thing. There we go. Whoop, I didn't get all the way through all these layers, so let me hit it one more time right there. Alright, now, how do we apply a locks fastener, you say? The locks fastener is a really, really cool fastener. I should have 2 of them sitting up here. There it is. The ones that come in the kit are antique brass because the rest of the kit is all brass hardware, and yeah. So how these work is they've got a little spring-loaded button. You pull this cap off right here, and it comes apart. Okay. So that being said, this part with the cap is on the outside of the strap, and this part with the little button on it is on the inside of the bag piece. So we unscrew the washer off of the button piece, and we stick the button piece inside of our pocket. We can pull that piece of rubber that I used. If you don't have a piece of that rubber like that, that's more than fine. You can just use a thick piece of scrap leather or a small cutting board or a piece of wood. I mean, use your imagination. You're just trying to make it to where your hole punch doesn't go all the way through the bag. You just want it to go through that front part. So I've stuck it through there from the back side, and now I'm going to twist this little washer back onto it, and I'm just going to spin it until it's tight, and then I'm going to use my little key and tighten it up a little bit more. These locks fasteners are awesome because they don't come off. They don't work their way out. They don't break. I mean, they're made in Germany. They're really, really nice fasteners. key. This little key fits in those two little holes, and that's how it works to help you tighten that sucker up. They make a nice fancy one of these keys with like a wooden handle on it and everything, and it is nice to have, but if you don't set a lot of these, there's just not a point in spending the $15 on it. So there we go. That one's good and tight. Now the same thing here. I've got to unscrew the washer from the button part. Stick that inside the bag. Put the washer back on. Make sure it's not cross-threaded. That is a problem sometimes. I swear I'm cross-eyed sometimes as much as I try to cross-thread things. There we go. Alright, so those are on there. Now we got to put the other end on. So same concept. Alright, we unscrew the washer, put the top through the strap, and it does have a little Locks logo on it. I do like to keep that you know, on the bottom of it, just so it looks straight and nice, and it's not, you know, all whomper-jawed and off to the side or something crazy like that. Now this one, we're going to have to tighten pretty good to make sure that the washer is down far enough for it to snap onto that button down there. Okay, this strap's about 9-10 ounces or so, and that's about its max for this part of the locks fastener. So there we go. Now it's started. So I'm just going to screw it down until it's just as tight as I can make it by hand, and then I'll snap it on and make sure that it's tight enough. I have wrestled with these things trying to put them on too thick of leather. I've even taken and like skived out the middle of the hole there and everything to on thicker pieces, trying to get it to work. It always ends up working, but it's the amount of work I have to put into it to get it there. Alright, there it is. Snaps down beautifully. Do the exact same thing on the other side. Once again, I'm going to make sure that the logo is towards the bottom there. It's funny because I really kind of dread making one of these backpacks because there's just so much involved in it. But once I get to the point that we're at right now, I get super excited because it's really coming together and starting to look nice. And yeah, I will tell you this, a maker's mark, if you're going to put on this, you know, one of the ways to put it on Kodiak would be to brand it on, but I understand not everybody has a branding iron. So a really good place to put one is right there or right in the middle of the top flap. I'll take a piece of veg tan, I'll put my maker's mark on it, and I'll sew it on. It'll look really nice. And that'll be one of the last things I do to this bag. But anyway, here's where we're at right now at the end of this video. It's looking pretty dang good. I'm very happy with it. And yeah, we'll stop this one and come back to the next video. We'll start putting the main pieces of the bag together. Till then, I'm Aaron Heiser, Maker's Leather Supply, and thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day.